Hey guys, today we're going to be continuing the long but still important top 100 NBA players list. We've got players 70 to 61 to reveal today, and really just the last portion of our star role players. And that really comes before we start to hit some of the real stars in our league, and that is really just a sign of just how talented our league really is, where we can consider, our top 60 guys as all true stars in the league. But before we get to those top 60, we have to give credit to the remaining role-playing stars that we do have to shed light on. And so we're going to start here with Christian Braun at number 70. Just someone who probably had one of the better improvement years that we've seen in recent years. And the real draw around CB is not really just the two-way impact, but really just the offensive upside that he brings compared to most two-way wings in our league and those designated wing defenders. And he really did this in terms of just the elite timing and the reaction speed as a lethal baseline cutter and dunker spot roamer next to offensive hub Nikola Jokic. And that's what we saw over the past year with such an absurdly efficient season from Christian Braun on the offensive side of the ball. In terms of the shooting, for his designated role, it's still relatively unpolished in terms of the catch and shoot jumper. And he's not really someone who can go blow for blow with high efficiency on volume attempts from the three, and that did show. He only took 2.8 threes a game last season, and though he did shoot a respectful 39.7% from the three, it's just not something yet that is a real dominant feature to his off-ball game just yet, and that does present the drawbacks for him as a wing. But the Nuggets in the past season, though, they were extremely lucky, and that didn't really hold back the actual offensive team results, losing KCP, who was a more talented spacer in theory the season before. And that really is because of the surging improvement that you got from Aaron Gordon as a shooter who could actually offer another spacing, option in the lineup. And that allowed Christian Braun to really, enhance his powers as a backline roamer. And with AG's, continued success as a shooter within the past 12 months of what we've seen, Denver wouldn't have been able to churn out those reliable offensive results with more cramped spacing. So that did help out Christian Braun's perceived value amongst the league in the past year. But as far as the intelligent contributions go to an offense in a system that does revolve around, ball and player movement, the ball and play movement that Nikola Jokic integrates throughout the players on the floor with him, just Braun was an absolute seamless fit, slotting into that role. And in terms of the transition, he was absolutely dominant, and that's where he really started to flex that physical athleticism that he brought to the game. And that was throughout the entirety of last season. He ranked in the 91st percentile, getting over 6 points per game in full court situations. And as far as the cutting goes, CB was one of the highest volume guys. He ranked third amongst all non-bigs in total possessions on cuts. And with the defensive role that he played for a hopeless regular season defense towards the end of the season, a team that was just holding on to whatever defensive personnel that they could find, Christian Braun was so immensely valuable, just being able to wall off guards with that upper body strength and the all-out motor to be able to compete with guys throughout their downhill pressure. And in the playoffs, he proved to us that there aren't many wings as good at absorbing contact as CB. And in terms of the two-way impact, there aren't many guys that were able to play to that efficiency perfection as what Christian Braun did when you factor in the offensive side of the ball and his pairing with Nikola Jokic. We talked about the shooting, holding him back a little bit, but 71% in the restricted area, that's elite. 50% in the paint non-restricted area, that's super high level. You get 42% on above the break threes, again, another high level number, and over 63% effective field goal percentage. Just elite numbers overall in terms of the efficiency and the selection of diet. But shifting from that, defensively, out of guys to have defended over 250 field goals in the playoffs, CB ranked the second most efficient defender, only behind Chet Holmgren, holding players down on their typical field goal percentages. And as we saw throughout the entire playoff run, we just saw his ability to actually flourish in those environments, just a more heightened allowance for him to play with that physical coverage with the upper body strength that he offers. And when you add in a lot of that connected passing and the positive movement, Christian Braun, from what we saw last season, was clearly one of the league's premier role players with the cohesive value that he proved in a unique Denver roster. And he absolutely thrived all of last year, and he absolutely gets credit here at number 70. And now flipping onto our number 69 spot, we're flipping to another Denver Nugget here, someone who is also pretty absurdly efficient, especially for the volume of scoring that he does provide. And that is the newly acquired Cam Johnson from the Brooklyn Nets, a guy who last season averaged a pretty exceptional 19 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists on 58% effective field goal percentage in the 57 games that he suited up in. And that is exceptional production as your role-playing wing, typically. And last season, Cam was in a position where he put up these insanely valuable splits, considering the size that he brings to the table, but just on a poor basketball team, and we weren't able to see him contribute to winning, and we haven't been able to see him contribute to winning since his Phoenix days. But now, with his arrival in Denver, hopefully we'll get to see just how good of a role player he can be, contributing to his first winning situations since the Suns with Chris Paul and Devin Booker, when he was just 25 years old. Now, obviously, a few years later, now he's a mature 28 years old, and he's in the absolute heat of his prime. We've seen what Cam Johnson can produce, and he will bring talents to Denver that they've been wanting for absolute years out of their perimeter wing position that they weren't really able to find with Michael Porter Jr. We talk about the versatility multiple times in some episodes here, and taking claim over the 3 spot is something that's going to be a massive improvement with what Cam Johnson's going to bring relative to what Michael Porter Jr. was able to bring during the Nikola Jokic era. And for Cam, I know trading him for Michael Porter Jr., that's going to cause a bit of upset for fans and a bit more question marks. Can he replicate the spacing part that MPJ brought as an elite movement shooter, especially throughout the regular season? But I believe he does bring much of that value. I mean, he proved it last year, and he's shown that he's a tremendous shooter in this league, and he does have those similar, great over-the-top shooting advantages that MPJ has brought in his Denver tenure. And he did put this on display. You saw the transition value from Cam Johnson last year in Brooklyn. You saw the spot-up work throughout all of last season. But also, it's more about the extra juice that you get as a positive and very capable on-ball creator relative to his anticipated role. And that just made this deal all the more of a win. And though you had to give up an extremely valuable asset in that first-round pick for 2032, I just think the fit with Cam Johnson as a mature but also a multifaceted wing contributor is just something so hard to pass up on. And I think Denver made the right choice. And that's kind of placed them as equal favorites with OKC to go for the title next year, not just in the West, but overall. And during these Nikola Jokic prime years, you really want to maximize your window. And that's exactly what Denver did by making this deal. I think Denver should be extremely happy. Their fan base should be extremely encouraged as well by the title chances that they have. And this is probably the most talent that they've been able to put together on paper during the Nikola Jokic era and maybe of all time. Cam is a legit great offensive piece, someone who can hold up defensively, as not just a good athlete, but just someone who serves tons of valuable length that's able to disrupt, pull up rhythm for wings, someone who has great discipline as a grounded defensive coverage wing who doesn't typically bite on shot fakes and deceptive counters. He's just bringing a lot of that stuff that MPJ wasn't able to bring. And with that, he slots into the common trend of most two-way spacing guys in the league as a true star in his role. And though he's not the twitchiest or most athletic offensive creator or wing out of that spot, and that does hold back the ultimate ceiling with Cam Johnson and why he isn't on the upper echelon of this list. But Cam is a certain plus on the NBA floor, just with the sustainable juice that he gives Denver on multiple ends, and something that they didn't really have out of his position last year. So he slots in here at number 69, getting his credit there. Next up, I want to give credit to Andrew Nembhard from Indiana. One of the most glorified role guys in our league, someone with a conference finals and a finals appearance under his belt in the last 2 seasons as a starter. And though we won't really see him be contributing to any major winning scenarios next season or maybe in the future as well, in all likelihood, especially with Halliburton out for probably the entirety of next season, I think it's important to remember the work that Nembhard has done to contribute to the most resilient offense in the NBA over the past 24 months. Truly a picture-perfect two-way role player. He's a capable second-side shot creator, and that's the stuff that you get out of him that you don't from most of these two-way wings. Someone who can actually be relied upon to take on volume on-ball duties on the biggest stages as well. I mean, during various stretches in the finals, I mean, we even saw it in the finals against a hellacious OKC point of attack defense, where Nembhard was able to keep the composure and use that polished enough skill set, just allowing him to swing the tide in certain bouts, like what we saw in game one in that clutch time mastery, to steal that first road game win for Indiana. And besides the on-ball stuff that he did show, and that was mainly in the playoffs, because the regular season, the on-ball stuff wasn't overly stunning. Besides that, I mean, Nembhard was one of the league's best and premier point of attack defenders for the entirety of last season with his playoff run as well. Just the playoff resilience in that role, just being able to hassle some of the hardest matchups on the biggest stage, just with the work that he was giving to Jalen Johnson and all the hassles that we saw him give to SGA in the finals. Just so much to give him credit for. He's just one of the most tenacious recovery defenders in pick and roll. Someone who offers you real sustainable screen navigation, real technical screen navigation at that, exceptional footwork, but exceptional motor. And in terms of that recovery stuff, just using those accurate hands and the length that he does have to be able to disrupt those handoffs, disrupt the handle pocket from behind of some of the best offensive players in the league. And with Nembhard, really, there isn't anything in particular that does pop out in terms of the physical build and the athletic talent that he has. But in terms of blending that motor with the sufficient physical stability that he has to offer, and he does this in a way that gives you this 48-minute defensive coverage that incrementally tolls your energy. And his competitive fight was really just the reason that the Pacers could contain Jalen Johnson for the second part of that series and force the OKC creators into multiple subpar performances in multiple games in the finals. And again, like most of these role players, I mean, the on-ball stuff isn't really something that he can turn up to high volume consistency, and that is the drawback when you're talking about talent amongst the league. But in terms of the timely reps that he was able to offer in crunch time, that was the thing for me that was on display for Indiana, and on display to the point where he could actually bail out broken actions in late clock situations late in the playoffs, and there is tremendous value and being able to rely on one of your two-way role players to be able to do that for you consistently. And when we're considering just how good of a season Nembhard had, and that is a big factor in my criteria, in terms of the playoff scaling, I mean, that played an absolute huge factor in Nembhard being above a lot of guys that could offer you larger portions of production in the regular season. I mean, from the regular season, Andrew Nembhard just shot 29% on all of his threes. That bumped up to 47% in the postseason. And in terms of the reliable production he gave you, he averaged 12 points and 3 rebounds and 5 assists throughout the playoffs as one of the best second-side creators of the 2025 NBA postseason. And for the exceptional contribution that we saw to a winning side on the Pacers' road to the finals, that for me is certainly enough to have Nembhard land here at number 68. Now we're going to look at another guy, someone who was more prolific with his defensive campaign through last season, and just an absolute point of attack beast. Just one of the best at, ball swiping, and one of the best passing intercepting merchants that we've seen over the last decade, and the best in the league at that in the past year, as we have Dyson Daniels landing here. Someone who covered an extreme amount of holes for his teammate Trae Young, and did that to an incredible level with a productive season. He averaged 14 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists, with a league-leading 3 steals as the league's most improved player, and he also ranks second in DPO wire voting, which is pretty nice, especially for a mediocre Atlanta squad. For me, yes, this is one of my core values. I do think his value defensively was a little bit boosted just purely by sitting next to one of the league's worst defenders in Trae Young. But in terms of the value that he gave you of actually gaining extra possessions at a historic rate, I mean, Dyson was just one of the most effective guys that we've seen on the perimeter in terms of that insane reaction speed and the hand-eye coordination in both on and off-ball possessions, and it's really hard to get that from your designated defenders in the league. And with the physical build that Dyson grants with the versatility, with his accurate lateral footwork, I mean, Dyson is just one of the best at what he does. And he was by far the league leader in steals for the entirety of the season, and in terms of the defensive vision, I mean, the weak side hand activity was absolutely insane to watch. And he's, his actual stunting and swarming, whenever ball handlers have their back turned for a second, it's just so accurate with that timing. And he'll pick off reads in any action, really. Talk about the player tracking off ball. That allows him to be able to blow up those receptions on DHOs and off-screen actions. Talk about the tempting positioning off ball, which increases the susceptibility of poor cross-court passing decisions made. And he was absolutely ruthless here. Usually steal numbers do get blown out of proportion in terms of the value of averaging high steal counts, but in terms of Dyson's, point of last year, his defensive value was absolutely exceptional because he provides a team with both an elite on and off ball defensive option. And that is just something that most guys can't. And with the offensive juice that he gives you, with the advantage extending, last season, a very decent closeout attacker with a physical frame and with the connective reads that he can chain together as an off-ball piece. He just added, such a great and needed requisite talent to Atlanta. And though a pretty inefficient offensive piece in terms of the actual play finishing, the shot touch from really everywhere on the floor in terms of just the perimeter especially. He does have more off-ball polish to show off next season, but in terms of being one of the premier defensive talents in our league, there weren't many that were as destructive throughout the entirety of last season as Dyson Daniels, and that really was his superpower as a possession-gaining freak on the perimeter, and that's why he does land here at number 67. Though he didn't contribute to a winning situation, yes, but this guy did way more at a historic rate and had one of the best campaigns that we've seen from a role player in the past decade. Number 66, we're going to move on to someone who lands just a sneak above Dyson Daniels for me, and that is Thompson. And someone who I view as, defensively, someone that provides pretty similar overall value to what Dyson was able to do last year. But in terms of, ranking defensive talents, I believe Thompson kind of just clears Dyson a little bit, just in terms of, obviously Dyson has the elite hand and reactive activity, like I just quickly mentioned, but because of the destructive and game-breaking athleticism that Thompson brings, I do have him a tiny notch above when we are ranking these elite defenders in the NBA. The ability to actually blow up plays as maybe the most talented screen navigator in basketball, and we know how high a dosage, of pick and rolls that teams like to run in the NBA, and that is mightily valuable for a team. He has the league best recovery abilities, probably. I spoke about Jalen Suggs maybe being able to rival him here, but Thompson's actual build, the abilities that he has as a recovery defender with the explosive foot and vertical speed, that ability to be able to wipe away layup and floater releases with that staunching wingspan, but also those staunching and speedy contests that he can offer. It's just something that we haven't really seen before from any player in the NBA, and though he is extremely raw and far from a finished product in terms of the offensive fit that he offers you, he certainly at least found a role for Houston in that clunky situation that he was in, just as one of the consistently best cutters and backline workers in the NBA. Just the work on the glass and the timing of his vertical pop. He's an extremely smart basketball player who does weaponize the athleticism on the margins as an offensive wing who can take guard responsibilities from time to time. And that is something that we did know before the draft. Thompson was a great passing prospect before the draft and, always had that potential advantage creation that in him with the lightning speed and the length that he has to be able to create those exaggerated change of direction moves to get downhill. But he added that to Houston last year, especially with the heightened responsibilities that he had. And in terms of the ball handling piece, the ability to take some of that pressure off Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green last year, and even in the playoffs as well, allowing those two guards to play as occasional movement shooters on a Houston team that really had next to no shooting, and him being able to actually handle the ball and make those timely decisions as a ball handler was extremely valuable for the Rockets for a Rockets team that was really just trying to milk whatever they could out of their situation of, poor offensive skill. And with the table setting and those setup reads, that was just a larger aspect of his game that he proved in his second year. And though the numbers aren't really pretty, you talk about those initiated pick and rolls for him, though those numbers aren't, staggering yet, he is in his second year, but it's more the talent that he's already posing. You talk about that explosiveness that he matches with that agile knifing frame that he has. it's just an absolute nightmare to keep in front of you, especially for those drop coverage bigs, guys who naturally just can't shift and predict that bolting mobility that he has. And though the finishing needs a little bit of work and a little bit more polish to it as well, even though that is relatively developed already, Eamon already poses himself as an unstoppable shot hunter, especially when he is in that attack mode. And at this point in time, it's not really just the athleticism that makes the quality of his look so great, but it's also the fact that teams don't typically game plan for him too much because of the lackluster perimeter skill that he does have. And that does make low drop coverage an easy choice of coverage for him. But he's able to weaponize that downhill speed and the agility of, and like the speed, lightning speed of that footwork and change of direction that he does have. And his ultimate weakness really is just that perimeter skill making piece. And like, I don't think the skinny frame, some people will point at that, I don't really think that sees him getting punished defensively that much. And it kind of allows him to be that sparky and space mauling athlete that he is defensively. But in terms of just the perimeter skill, I mean, that shooting is just so dreadful outside on the three. You know, in the 7-game series against the Warriors, to have one of your guards or even wings, whatever you want to call him on the offensive end, to make one single three and only attempt 4 threes in a team that desperately needed any sort of shooting. And that just doesn't really allow him to reach that ceiling that we know he's capable of. But for all that he does on the margins, you know, that is really what gets him ranked here above on the higher portion of these elite role players. We talk about the screening, talk about the roll man mobility, talk about the downhill passing, the baseline and dunker spot vertical value that he brings, the defensive play destruction, the rebounding help, the putback insurance that he gives you. I mean, he's just one of the most dominant role players in our league, and he does that by flexing his athletic superpowers in every way that he can. And that's why ultimately he does get the nod here. He had an exceptional season last year, had some amazing performances throughout the regular season, and got himself an all-defensive nod. So for that part as well, he does rank here at number 66. The flaws are pretty vivid for him, but there is so much for him to work on, but there is also so much time for him to work on that too. Number 65 is probably someone that comes in here as a bit of a surprise for most of you probably. I've got Isaiah Hartenstein, someone who is landing above many great guys, great role players, but definitely I've got a real reason for him. And obviously in like Lou and Kaysen's case, it does start with the 2025 campaign that he had. Legitimately, Hartenstein was one of the best supporting cast players in the NBA. And with the dominant stretch as OKC's third best player in that span without Chet Holmgren in the regular season when he was rehabbing off his injury, I mean, that portion for me was something that I couldn't forget. And in those 29 games that Hartenstein played, you know, before Chet came back from injury, in that span, the Thunder went 26-3. And he led so much of that offensive initiation, just proved himself again like he did in New York as that offensive hub above the break. And that's really just where iHeart's unique talent comes. He may literally be one of the best passing bigs of all time. We're talking about like the ball placement. You talk about the precise angles that he can lay the ball for backdoor cutters and flaring shooters. It's just so special. And when he pairs that with the tremendous screening, I mean, he just poses himself as one of the premier DHO fulcrums in basketball, which we did see from New York, you know, being able to help Jalen Brunson get those perfect downhill advantages, you know, being able to help Dante DiVincenzo get that initial separation as a volume movement shooter, which saw their success individually. And now we just saw him for an entire season use that those DHO abilities to be able to alleviate so much of the screen navigation that can hassle SGA from time to time. And the fact that he contributed to a championship squad with the physical resilience that OKC wanted for him, that he did exhibit against Nikola Jokic, especially when Holmgren seemed helpless against those post-up bigs. I mean, he just gave OKC those finalizing touches on what they did need to compete for a title and ultimately win the championship trophy. And with the size and physicality that he brought, as well as, you know, assisting as a top-tier rebounder, one of the biggest weaknesses, you know, for OKC prior to last year's offseason, you know, adding in just another great and advanced on-ball decision maker for OKC and just an absolute great teammate, someone with an extreme veteran-like motor. I mean, to me, it's an absolute no-brainer to have him up here. Obviously, he does rank lower on this list simply because the offensive punch doesn't really have any reliable self-creation to it whatsoever. Besides those pretty floaters, that's really just the play finishing stuff. Hartenstein doesn't really pose as a plus post-up guy, considering his size. He can't really space the floor outside of those close mid-range floaters that he does take. And he doesn't have any go-to moves to throw at those slower bigs. But that's not his game right now. He's one of the top-tier playmaking bigs that we've really ever seen as a talent, just with the passing and screening superpower that he has. And that has made him one of the most reliable starters in the league for a few years now. And last season, contributing 11 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists to the best team in basketball. That, for me, is enough to credit him here at number 65. And next up, though, was a very hard choice for me to make in terms of differentiating between Hartenstein and this next guy, just in terms of the value and talent that they brought to their respective teams. And to me, I believe the load that this guy posed, just in terms of the extra offensive versatility that he gives you as a play finisher, and the tremendous work they did defensively in the playoffs, that landed him just above Hartenstein, and that is Myles Turner, someone who did sign with the Milwaukee Bucks and probably won't be on a championship contender anymore for the next few years. But Myles Turner, in terms of what he's given us in the last few years, he's just given us 2 especially great years as a deep playoff run anchor, just a defensive beast, but also a high-level pick and popper for that high-level Pacers offense that they were running. And with Turner, he was legitimately outplaying some very good centers in the NBA for multiple games in the playoffs. We saw him in multiple different contests outplay Jared Allen, Karl Anthony Towns, Chet Holmgren. And though, not so good anymore, Turner was just absolutely fried Brook Lopez in that first round. And just the ability to be able to rely on a role-playing center in theory to compete with some of the best centers in his position, that's just such an immense luxury for Indiana that they have loved over the past few years. And though it is gutting to lose him, they did get so much value out of him in his time for Indiana. And he primarily contributed this value really just because of the spacing piece, which before the finals, he was shooting 40% on threes on 4 attempts a game in the playoffs as your 5-man, and his ability to absorb contact as well as deny penetration on the defensive end was so pivotal in that ability to be able to compete with a guy like Karl Anthony Towns admirably for the most part of that conference final series. And the ability to offer that extra skill in terms of the play finishing is what kind of makes him just a higher level of talent compared to most of those bigs that I've ranked below him. And for Turner, it's just mostly the value that he brings, not just as a skilled big, but as a veteran presence, and in terms of the leadership that he brings at that 5-man spot. Typically a position that does involve so much cognitive scanning at all times defensively, especially when you are constantly being brought up into action, but also not just that you also have to account for helping your teammates off ball. And Myles Turner just did that to such an admirable level in the postseason. He ranked 3rd in the NBA for differential percentage for guys who have defended 250 or more field goals in the playoffs. And he led the league in total playoff boxes as well. Just a massive statement postseason for Myles Turner, who now finds himself in Milwaukee with a chance to pair himself and pair that perimeter skill that he brings with an offensive surgeon version of Giannis. And for sure, one of the best play finishing centers that the league has seen in the last 10 years, and he deserves his spot here. And leading on, and really just on a similar trend to the past few guys in terms of the success that they saw in the past season, in terms of the team success, we have maybe the most productive and efficient defender from the playoffs, who is also an NBA champion, and that is Alex Caruso. Someone who lands here really just from that the defensive playmaking traits and the defensive mastery that he brings in terms of the versatility piece as a semi-sized guard. Someone who was tasked with some of the most enormous matchups in the league, and he no doubt delivered to a historic level in those opportunities that he was given. And of course, I'm talking about those performances against Nikola Jokic, against Jaren Jackson Jr. in that first round, against Julius Randle, and in those possessions in the finals containing Pascal Siakam. Every single power player that was in OKC's way of the title, Caruso just had them in locks. And it really just comes from his understanding of, the biggest weaknesses of bigs. That vision, the security of their ball handling, which can really dip. Just the activity of those swarming hands and those timely ball swipes, just ripping away gathers and those penetrating handles. He just makes you uncomfortable in a way that just keeps you in jail, just unable to create room against him as well. I mean, his ability to draw illegal physicality with ease against those bigs is a big reason why he actually could and sufficiently guard them in certain stretches of the game. And when you're ranking the best perimeter defenders in the league, he may not be the most prolific in terms of like the stats, how much he was used, but in terms of the actual talent, with those freaky cognitive advantages that he does bring, with the timing, with the reaction speed, with the positioning IQ, and when he matches that with that elite hand speed and accuracy, the lateral speed and lateral accuracy as well, we may have just seen like the very peak of what guard defense looks like with what he was able to do in that playoff stretch. Just one of the most destructive supplements that a coach could have at their disposal, where Mark Daigneault was able to just throw him at literally whatever time and whatever task that you want him to fulfill, and you could get quality results. And that was on both ends as well. We're not just talking about defense with him. I do want to touch quickly on offense, because people will just pull up numbers and say whatever. But Caruso, in that playoff stretch, especially when he was heavily leaned on as OKC's fourth best player, he was an exceptional connective passer, a spot-up shooting beast in the postseason. He shot 42% off the catch from three. You talk about the zone attacking with that veteran poise that he brings. You talk about the active screens that he sets as a guard to be able to give those inverted spacing actions, just constantly exposing mismatches for SGA and J-Dub to go to work. Talk about the physical transition athlete that he was able to pose himself as. And therefore, with an incredible postseason run, where he did lead the league in playoff defensive box plus minus, he led the league in steal rate and deflection rate. He 1000% deserves his love here, and I don't care about any production numbers. The impact on winning and just the actual versatility of his game, there aren't many players that can do what Alex Caruso can do on a basketball floor in a role-playing scenario. And now, starting to get a sniff of some of the real stars in our league, we're going on to number 62, with Trae Young's running mate, Jalen Johnson, coming in here as we are steadily creeping towards those real stars of our league in this ranking. So with Jalen, for me, he's absolutely at least knocking on this door, unless he's already there, of that star list. And obviously, Jalen's season last year was interrupted by injury. He only ended up playing in only 36 games with that season-ending shoulder injury that he got in January. And that did tank Atlanta's ceiling, as he was giving them near all-star level production, and they missed out on so much of that towards the end of the season. He was averaging 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists with 2.6 stocks per game as one of the league's premier athletes, someone who was showing real signs of that growing skill as a big ball-handling prospect, and also someone that could also provide that downhill penetration at the forward spot. And someone who should be in all-star discussions as of next season, especially if he can recover from this injury relatively well. And the draw around Jalen is really just the versatility of his athletic and skill blend. Jalen has proved himself as a very capable driver of the basketball, and we knew that this potential was there. I mean, he's always been this freak athlete, but Jalen's actual composure and vision and the on-ball vertical timing and launch just makes him so difficult to contain, and just makes him really special and separates him from most of these athletes around the league as on-ball drivers. And to continue with the offensive part as well, I mean, Jalen Johnson may be one of the most versatile pieces just in terms of the ability to initiate inverted action as a ball handler, but also to be able to provide like a great roll man option next to Trae Young, someone that pairs himself with, the key traits that Trae Young brings as a pick and roll passer, with the pocket passing, also the downhill gravity that he provides, and with also the spot up and the closeout attacking skill set that Johnson has. I mean, he's just an amazing fit who just has such a versatile future in the league, especially when he does get the shot making to come together, which is at the moment at a pretty average level. And obviously the explosive first step, attacking off the catch when he has those advantages and runways. I mean, in terms of pairing next to Trae Young, someone who is one of the elite volume advantage creators in basketball, I mean, there aren't many better players you could pair him with. And with the athletic abilities that Johnson provides as an above-the-rim finisher, I mean, he just complements not just Trey's situation, but just any situation, basketball situation that he would be placed in theory. And defensively, he's pretty competent. He's got that athleticism and that physical build that makes him, at least talented on this end. He does put up some occasional display of, help side defense, helping from the nail in those weak side spots. But obviously, being a help side roamer does kind of jeopardize his assignment vision. His awareness isn't super consistent. He can be backdoor cut on, or, he can be thrown into off-ball action pretty frequently. And that's where you can sometimes have trouble when he is forced to contain on the perimeter. But, the talent is extremely there. But for Jalen and what he has shown, it's more about the actual offensive, firepower that he can bring with the elite athletic superpower that he does have. And we know that there's so much, growth to show from him in terms of the overall polish that he has as a play finisher. But in terms of the transition force that he provides, those twitchy jabs and the electric runway speed on those high screen actions, it's just so much stuff that you actually can't teach in athletes. But he's also skill base is a lot higher than most of these young athletes. He has been in the system for a few years, but now it's all starting to come together for Jalen now. And he's absolutely setting himself up for perennial all-star discussions for years to come for Atlanta next to Trae Young. So he does land here at 62. But to round out our ranking today, our ranking reveal today, we have a true fan favorite. And like Jalen, someone who probably is a star in this league already, but he is in this 10-point trajectory here on this ranking, and that is Austin Reaves. Just one of the most polished cognitive shot creators in the NBA. Someone who absolutely maximizes the talent, not just with the skill development as a great on and off ball shooter, but also as a downhill finisher, but also someone that understands just how to blend those pace and direction variance traits with the timely physicality and footwork to hunt any angle that he wishes. Like, he's just such a high reactive shot creator downhill, and that's what makes him so special and what makes him have those traits to a Jalen Brunson and a Luka Doncic. He isn't the greatest athlete, but he understands how to hunt those angles with those cognitive skills. And in terms of the limitations, obviously, I'll quickly state them. It's defensive ceiling. He's a poor overall athlete, and he does have mediocre foot speed and really no imposing vertical pop or reaction speed, and that does hold him back. And we saw the lack of athleticism drip some drawbacks into the shot creation on the offensive side. Obviously, he isn't an athlete that can gain insane elevation. He doesn't pose any insane speed advantages downhill, even against mismatches. But those vivid limitations in his game with the athleticism, I do believe that Reaves is still an exceptional offensive fit. Someone that just provides so much portability in his game to any situation, like what we spoke about with Jalen Johnson before. He's just such a talented passer and ball mover. And when he's extending advantages, his vision is pretty developed so far. And someone with such a high 3-level scoring kit, someone that can provide capable volume pick and roll reps, even sitting next to LeBron and Luka in the offense. There's a real reason why Laker fans absolutely adore Austin Reaves. And that reason really, he just gave you a 20.4 rebound and 6 assist season as a tertiary option on a very credible 56% effective field goal percentage. And though the playoffs did unravel a lot of the redundancies of his pairing with Luka and LeBron, with the athleticism and the defensive competence piece, he's just someone, though, that just competes, and he's just someone that you want on your basketball team. And that is really just the thing to love about AR. You're just getting a super competitive basketball player, and though you do get those drawbacks, and, if you question the competitive spirit from time to time. Just look at the development that Reaves has given you throughout his entire career, from where he started and what he was expected to be, to now being one of the best third stars in the NBA who deserves a payday very soon. So though he does have drawbacks, though he is not a natural athlete next to some guys who already are very poor athletes themselves, there is certain credibility for the Lakers' decision to actually keep Austin Reaves around for at least another season. Though the redundancy in spurts with this fit, Reaves just has committed himself as just a very positive off-ball player next to Luka and LeBron, and that was the big question mark. And he just has so much game sense and so many versatile abilities on the offensive side of the floor. And, he has to be given credit here at number 61 with everything that he's been able to do over the past 24 months, developing himself to where he is now as one of the most reliable on-ball second side shot creators in basketball. And he's so close to many of the stars in our league that I'll be revealing in our next episode of this ranking. And so with rounding out with Austin Reaves, I thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys did enjoy that ranking breakdown. And if you guys disagree, just give me your analysis on these guys and how you guys value them. This is just my style of ranking with my own personal criteria, and it is subjective. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next podcast. Enjoy your week and enjoy some more Summer League, and I'll be back very soon with some more off-season content.